Okay, Odyssey Book 12, Part 2. Remember, we kind of previewed all these things to come. He goes back to Circe, buries his man after he's got the Tiresian prophecy, and she tells him of these dangers ahead. First, we've got the Sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis are coming. So at dawn, Odysseus and his men continue their journey. Odysseus decides to tell the men only of Circe's warning about the Sirens, whom they will soon encounter. He's fairly sure that they can survive this perils, and if he keeps up their spirits. Suddenly the wind stops. So remember, the whole point of the Sirens is these alluring mermaids sing this song that no sailor can resist, and they steer their ships towards these mermaids only to get destroyed on the rocks, but they can't help themselves. So think about the metaphor, think about the meaning. Remember, a myth perpetuates cultural importance, things that are important to a culture. Think of it as a parable, right? A model of what to do, or sometimes a warning for what not to do. So here you have this great metaphor of the Sirens, that there are these things in life that pull you off your course and inevitably wreck your ship, but you are powerless to change course. So think about those things in life. Drugs, money, power, these things that can pull a person off a good course in life and then destroy their lives, destroy their marriages, destroy their families, that kind of thing. So what are these siren songs? These alluring things that we need to avoid in our own life. When we steer our own course, how do we stay on the path? The crew were on their feet briskly to furl the sail and stow it then, and each in his place they poised the smooth oar blades and sent the white foam scudding by. I carved a massive cake of beeswax into bits and rolled them in my hands until they softened. No long task, for burning heat came down from Helios, the sun, lord of high noon. Going forward, I carried wax along the line and laid it thick upon their ears. So he's putting beeswax in the men's ears so they don't hear the siren song. But of course, he is curious. He wants to know. And then they tied me up, plumb amidships, back to the mast, lashed to the mast, and took themselves again to rowing. So Odysseus wants to hear. Soon as we came smartly within hailing distance, the two Sirens, noting our fast ship off their point, made ready, and they sang. The lovely voices in ardor, appealing over the water, made me crave to listen. And tried to say, "Untie me," to the crew, jerking my brows, but they bent steady to their oars. Then Perimedes got to his feet, he and Eurylochus, and passed more line about to hold me still. So all rolled on until the Sirens dropped under the sea rim. Their singing dwindled away. So they get past the Sirens, and Odysseus was one of the few men to actually hear the Sirens call and lived to tell the tale because he was tied to the mast. My faithful company rested on their oars now, peeling off the wax that I had laid thick upon their ears, then set me free. But scarcely had that island faded in the blue air than I saw smoke and white water with sound of waves and tumult. A sound the men heard, and it terrified them. Oars flew from their hands. The blades went knocking wild alongside till the ship lost way, with no oar blades to drive her through the water. While I walked up and down from bow to stern, trying to put heart into them, standing over every oarsman, saying gently, "Friends, have we never been in this danger before? More fearsome is it now than when the Cyclops penned us in his cave. What power he had! Did I not keep my nerve and use my wits to find a way for us out? Now I say, by hook or crook, this peril too shall soon something be that we remembered. Heads up, lads! We must obey the orders I give them. Get the oar shafts in your hands and lay back hard on your benches. Hit these breaking seas. Zeus, help us pull away before we founder. You at the tiller, listen, and take in all that I say. The rudders are your duty. Keep her out of the combers and the smoke. Steer for the headland. Watch the drift, or we fetch up in the smoother and you drown us." So once again, a good captain can spur his men on to victory. He's inspiring confidence within them. That was all, and it brought them round to action. But as I sent them on towards Scylla, remember that's the multi-headed Hydra, I told them nothing, as they could do nothing. They would have dropped their oars again in panic to roll for cover under the decking. So he doesn't tell them what's ahead. He, a captain, is going to have to make tough decisions. Do you steer more towards the whirlpool, which has the potential to sink your whole ship, or do you just go by Scylla, the multi-headed Hydra, that can only take a couple of your crew? It's a tough choice, but here's the model. Leaders have to make tough decisions sometimes. It's that insane math we have talked about. Losing a couple of crewmen is far better than losing your whole ship. So here we see a depiction of the choice he must make. If you sail too close to Charybdis, the whirlpool, it's going to take the whole ship down. If you sail too close to Scylla, you're going to lose at least, 6 of your men. And remember, every time you cut off a head, 2 more grow back. The problem just compounds. So a leader has to make tough choices. It's that insane math. Certainly losing 6 men is terrible, but it's better than losing the whole ship. Well, that was all, and it brought them round to action. So he stirred his men and inspired them. But as I sent them on towards Scylla, I told them nothing, as they could do nothing. They would have dropped their oars again in panic to roll for cover under the decking. Circe's bidding against arms had slipped my mind, so I tied on my cuirass and took up 2 heavy spears, then made way along to the foredeck, thinking to see her first from there, the monster of the grey rock, harboring torment for my friends. I strained my eyes upon the cliffside, veiled in cloud, but nowhere could I catch sight of her. And all this time, in travail, sobbing, gaining on the current, we rowed into the strait, Scylla to port, and on our starboard beam, Charybdis, dire gorge of the salt sea tide. By heaven, when she vomited, all the sea was like a cauldron seething over intense fire when the mixture suddenly heaves and rises. The shot spume soared to the landside heights and fell like rain, but when she swallowed the sea water down, we saw the funnel of the maelstrom. So it's like this monster below the sea that drinks it down, and when it does this giant gulp of water happens, she spews it into the air, and then this whirlpool opens up. That's the maelstrom, the whirlpool. We saw the funnel of the maelstrom, heard the rock bellowing all around, and dark sand raged on the bottom far below. My men all blanched against the gloom. Our eyes were fixed upon the yawning mouth in fear of being devoured. Then Scylla made her strike, whisking 6 of my best men from the ship. I happened to glance aft at ship and oarsmen and caught sight of their arms and legs dangling high overhead. Voices came down to me in anguish, calling my name for the last time. A man surf-casting on a point of rock for bass or mackerel, whipping his long rod to drop the sinker, and bait far out will hook a fish and rip it from the surface to dangle, wriggling through the air. So these were borne aloft in spasms toward the cliff. This was one of your terms from a while back to familiarize yourself with. This is an epic simile. Remember, simile uses like, as, or so. And here's the so. So it often makes it makes the unfamiliar familiar. So it's a comparison using like, as, or so. It compares one thing to another thing, but it will compare something you are familiar with to something you've never been familiar with. So I'm sure you have never seen Scylla catch 6 men in her mouth and eat them, but being good Greek boys and girls from Ithaca, which was islands, you were certainly used to seeing men go fishing. And so just as a man might throw his line far out to sea and then pull back and grab a fish and it's kind of wriggling in the air, so too were his men wriggling in the air. It's an epic simile. It makes the unfamiliar familiar. Continuing on. She ate them as they shrieked there in her den, in the dire grapple, reaching still for me, and deathly pity ran me through at that sight. Far the worst I ever suffered, questing the passes of the strange sea. We rode on. The rocks were now behind, Charybdis too, and Scylla dropped astern. Odysseus tries to persuade his men to bypass Thriantia. So, that's where the island of the cattle of the sun gods are. So basically, let's take a look. So this is the Sirens, where he goes after leaving the land of the dead. He returns, of course, to Cersei. Cersei warns him of this. But again, it's a metaphor for staying on your true course in life. Then we go ahead, just in between, where they believe that the boot of Italy and the island there of Palermo lies in between there, and that strait is where they believe Scylla and Charybdis lay. So again, better to go by the six-headed multi-beast and lose 6 men, as opposed to lose the whole ship down the Charybdis of Scylla. But then that leaves us with the prophecy. Up next, they're going to encounter the cattle of the sun god. That is Lord Helios. Remember, there was the prophecy, do not eat the cattle. We shall see. So once again, the cattle of the sun god, they go to this island, and it was a prophecy, don't eat the cattle. If you don't, you'll get home, it'll be smooth sailing on the left, on the right. If you do eat the cattle, then death and destruction await you. Of course, our book doesn't deal with that. It just kind of gives us a glimpse of it. It skips over it. But our book just simply says, Odysseus tries to persuade his men to bypass this island, Thriantia, where the island of the sun god Helios. But they insist on landing. They land, the wind goes away, so they're stuck. They eat all of their food. Driven by hunger, they ignore Odysseus' warning not to feast on the cattle. So he says, he stays up for days on end and doesn't know what to do. He says, whatever you do, don't eat the cattle. And then he goes up high on the mountain to leave an offering, and while he's gone, when he turns their back, the men eat the cattle. This disobedience angers the sun god, who threatens to stop shining if payment is not made for the lost cattle. To appease Helios, Zeus sends down a thunderbolt to sink Odysseus' ship. Odysseus alone survives, and the cattle actually come back to life and eat the men. He eventually drifts to Ogygia, the home of Calypso, who keeps him on her island for 7 years. With this, Odysseus ends his retelling of the story to King Alcinous. And now we've kind of caught up. Now we've filled in all the stuff that has happened. So now all that's going to happen is Odysseus is going to find his way in a bit of a chase scene back to home. And that's where we are going to start next. So in our book, if you notice, there's the picture of the Scylla and Charybdis. But our book, it ends here. So it goes on when Odysseus gets home. I'm going to fill in some of the stuff for the next time, but basically this ends our journey, and we're going to take a look at his return home next time.